the scriptorium. This is the third program in the series, and we'll be working with plate 5, the one called similar counters and branching. Now, first let's get our pens ready. I'm using a dip pen today with black ink, and have a piece of cloth in your hand when you're using a dip pen and wipe the top of the pen. The old-timers used to say that the pen should be like a duck with a wet belly and a dry back. Now, first of all, we'll indicate our waistline. Here is the writing line. This is the vertical margin along the edge. Now let's check our edge angle. See if we can cut that 90-degree angle at a 45-degree angle. 45-degree pen edge. We want to keep that edge at all time. And remember, one way of testing it is to draw a Greek cross, a vertical Greek cross. Don't slope it. These terminals should be cut at a 45-degree angle to the horizontal, and the two members of the cross should be approximately the same weight. Now let's look at a letter. I'm getting ready to talk about counters. Don't hurry. Now, apparently our edge angle is all right. We went in at a 45-degree angle with a hairline. The branching is thin at 45 degrees, and we made the exit at a 45-degree angle to the horizontal with a hairline. Now, let's see what is a letter. Well, common sense would say, well, the letter is that black ink. But you know, a letter is more than black ink. If you looked in the ink bottle, you wouldn't find any letters. Well, of course, nobody's been writing with it. But what do I mean by that? If you look in the ink bottle, there's only the ink. There is no white paper. And a letter is made up more of white paper than it is of ink. In other words, the white paper, which we can ignore, or seemingly, is an essential part of the letter, and it has to be designed. This little area in here, that shape, you can imagine that as a shape. This little exterior triangle, this shape here, which we call the counter, which is inside. These are things. I would like to have you think of them as things, as shapes made out of the untouched paper. And those shapes have to be all together, or we would have no letter. We'd have just a puddle of ink. Now, you say, well, that's obvious, all right. But when you write, you have to keep your eye on that white paper, on that untouched paper, and design it. Design it constantly. Let's put another letter in here. But I'm designing untouched paper as my pen moves. I'm not just designing the black ink. I designed this triangle, I designed this counter, and I designed this shape, which is an interspace. Notice there's a shape in here. In other words, the figure is on the field, but it has become part of a continuum. Space is continuous in here. It isn't just the letter, it isn't just the paper, but it's a continuous thing, space. And we have to design ink and paper as we move along. Now, we call this an inner counter, this an inner counter, this an outer triangular counter, here an outer triangular counter. In A, D, G, Q, B, and P, we have that identical shape. In A, D, G, and Q, it is outlined that way. But notice that white paper in here. This is an A, in D, in G, and in Q. Turn it upside down and around, and it's in B and P. Now, in designing B, obviously, the pen stays on the paper because there's no lift, and we make a continuous movement to make that B. If we write a P, this bowl is going to have to be repeated in the letter P. And in order to make and it will match the bowl on the B, because the bowl on the B began at the writing line. This has to be identical. Suppose we lift. You say, why not lift until it leaves the stem? All right, we start up here, about halfway up, come out. Now, your eye may not be accustomed enough to the subtleties of the letter yet, but this is a gradual curve coming out. This is an angle. And anyone who's experienced in examining letter designs will notice this gradual curve, will notice this angle, and say this P doesn't belong in the same alphabet with that one. In other words, it doesn't belong. It's what the printers would call a wrong font. I recommend that after you've written a number of these characters, you get a colored crayon or a colored felt pen and find out about the shape of that exterior triangular counter. Color it in. In coloring it in, you will experience the shape as you wouldn't probably if you just looked at it. If you color a line, as I've had students do frequently, they'll say, oh, please, may I stop? Because in the coloring, they see that their exterior triangular counters and that their inner counters are simply not the same. They don't harmonize. And that's the purpose of the whole thing, is to learn to see the shapes of these counters. See them as things designed. Now, they're there as shapes, even though they're not colored. But in coloring them, you'll be able to see them. We could cut that shape out with a pair of scissors or a knife and examine it, and we'd find that it's a rather pleasing shape in itself, just as this is. Now, let's color the counter of the A. That shape is a very important one, being in 5 letters. And you might cut that out with scissors and examine it as a separate shape. But the letter is also made up of the field, which is outlined, which is separated in here, up in here, over in here. Now, this space between the 2 letters is a very interesting shape. And as you learn to write, you'll keep your eye on that space and on that interesting shape that's in there, on the triangular counter that's down in here. So the writing becomes figure and field, a continuum, and you keep your eye on the whole field as you write. Well, let's look at AGNUP. I put only a few of these letters that involve similar counters. The exterior triangular counter, you'll notice, is numbered 3. So let's write an A. A D. See the same shape. And we'll write a G. See if we can get these shapes of the bowls the same at all times. We come over here and branch in halfway up between the writing line and the waistline. Notice that this is a continuous curve. This is rather narrow in here, and from here up, it's a straight line. But we keep the pen on the paper and come down and make the sweeping lower part. Repeat that bowl for Q, although I'd like to think of it as just part of Q and not as a part. Whoops, the pen skidded. Let me start again. This is very rough paper. Come down and angle this over, so there's no likelihood of this being confused with the G. So these counters should be very much alike. Let's look at the B, which is that counter upside down and turned around. And the P, branching out halfway up. We call this a branching as it leaves the stem, similar to the movement of a branch on a tree. This is the descender line now, so we'll have to write on this line, for every third line down, an N. It makes a difference the way you see a letter when you see it as mostly paper. On any page of writing or in a page of print, there's only a tiniest percent of that paper that has any ink on it. Maybe 1 or 2% of a page of printing in a book, for instance, has ink. The rest of it's all paper. So the paper is extremely important, and only a designer would be concerned with it probably, but he has to be if he's going to get a legible page that someone can read without trouble. Now, turn this upside down and around, and we should have the U and M turning into an M and a U. That is, the writing, the M and U is virtually an upside down U, the U virtually an upside down M. So let's go back to some of these other letters that have the triangular counters. M has counters that are a little narrower than those of N, but the branching is the same. And the exterior triangular counter is the same as it is in other letters. In the text that goes with plate 5, the last line says there are 13 of these counters. Well, that's a miscount. There are really 14 of them because M has an extra one here. I meant there were 13 letters that have this exterior triangular counter. Let's see, what's the next letter? An R that has an exterior triangular counter. Now R, you'll notice, is the narrowest letter in the whole alphabet. I and L, you'd say, well, they're narrower, but I and L have only the width of the pen. For letters that are two-dimensional, R is the narrowest one. This, historically, is really the top of a cap R, which did swing around this way and out, but we just start it and then stop it immediately. Now, this has to be kept very narrow. See what happens if you write an R and just keep going with this. This is called the ear, the part that extends out. You find it very easy to do that. Then you put a Y next to it. So you're writing the word rye. Now notice what an awful hole there is in there. This is so wide you could go through there with a stepladder held horizontally. It's way too wide. We have to have the same sort of spacing between our letters. So we have to make R very narrow. Now, the textbook is printed in Bembo type. It's a classic High Renaissance letter. It's based on the High Renaissance letter. And when you notice the R there, the R in both the Italic and in the Roman, you'll be astounded at how narrow that letter is. Incredibly narrow. And now we start the Y, we're writing right under that, the ear of the R. And go over. Y is one of the tricky letters because nothing is parallel to this second stroke, or this last stroke on Y. Nothing's parallel to that. Now let's put the E in. Now you'll see there's not such a hole here as compared with the, if I move the paper over, with the one here. By making this R very narrow and by starting the Y close to the ear, we save an awful lot of space in there and get a much better looking word out of it. And you can't do anything about this being a little wider than the space here, but that's all right. That helps identify it as R. It helps identify this as Y. But we don't want to overdo it. We want to get as close to even spacing as we possibly can. K has a tricky construction. make a bowl that swings way out, but come in close. This should be adequate white paper, but don't squeeze it. Don't squeeze it too much. Here is the writing line, say, here, or the waistline, here's the writing line. Now come in a little above, halfway between the two, and then bring this diagonal down. Now this counter here must be considerably bigger than that counter. Writers get careless sometimes, and this becomes smaller than this, and that makes a very ugly letter. We don't want letters that are top-heavy. So come in a little above center and then pull this diagonal down. With a large pen, you'll have to pull from the shoulders, but you use whatever movement is necessary in writing any letter, and generally you use your wrist as often as possible. Well, that covers most of the letters and these external triangular counters. I don't think I've left one out except possibly H, but it has a counter, and both counters are very much like those on N. And halfway up, branch out, swing around, come down parallel to that first stroke, and then make it an elliptical exit with the pen's edge up there at 45 degrees. That goes out halfway up on the U, the reverse branching we might call it, goes in halfway up, and the pen moves in a straight stroke once we get halfway up, because this is that vertical stem. Now, these are approximately the same size, same shape. These are approximately the same size and the same shape. So maybe we're doing all right in designing these. So let's spend a few minutes now with my going over the letters in your word list. Notice, however, that the spacing between the K and the H, the two words, seems tight if you look here at the base. Now, this comes out much closer than the width of an M, the base of this diagonal, much closer to the H. But look at this big hole in here. And as this sweeps in, swinging away from the next letter, and this swings away from the next letter, there's a huge counter in here, a huge inner space. So H has to be placed relatively close to K in order to get the inner space between the two words virtually optically equal to a little less than the width of N. The same thing is seen here in the relation between the H and the Q. The H ending high, the Q beginning quarry. The hairline exit of H is quite close to the bowl of the Q. But notice that this shoulder of H swings away. The top of Q swings very definitely and very vigorously away from the H. Consequently, there's a great amount of space up in here. And in order to make the optical effect something like a little less than the width of M, we have to bring the Q rather close here to the H, the bowl coming rather close to the hairline exit on H. The spacing is very tricky, and you'll want to watch that all the time. And right from the beginning here, I would have you watch the spacing between words. Don't let it be too much. There's a great danger in the words not making phrases, not making sentences, but just looking like words in a word list, and that won't do at all. And notice that here in the ending of quarry, I made the ear of R short as usual and begun the Y right under the ear of that R. That helps close up that big space, which is going to be larger down here than the width of N. But at the top, they're almost touching. So we might say optically, it gives the effect of being the width of N. Well, let's write a few words here. Yeah. Adage. It's a good word to practice. make a dry run to be sure you're spacing the two letters in the right way. So go in the air without touching the paper and try to project the image of what that would be if you were on the paper, and you can tell if the letter is too close or too far away. We call that a dry run. Whoop, that's supposed to be a D. I'm hurrying. In writing, you often think that you're farther along than you really are, and that leads to letters being left out. People think you can't spell. Well, remembering spelling when you're writing rather slowly is very tricky, very difficult. And if you make misspellings, you're just like everyone else. Of course, you'll have to do the job over, probably. But it takes concentration to do the writing. The next letter is probe. Now, let's see something more definite about the construction of that P. Here is the waistline. You start the stem of P with an entrance, but put the pen below the waistline with the right corner of the pen touching the waistline. Now sidle up until the pen is above the waistline with the left corner touching the waistline, and then pull down. You see that this is a pen width, and this is a pen width. Well, now we can go down here to the writing line and complete the letter. But the P looks better for some reason or other if it has a slightly higher beginning. Now, J looks as if it might be identical with that stem, but it isn't. With J, just poke through a little bit, but don't go up above the line of full pen width. Keep J short. Now, the T involves a construction very much like that of the P. Start with the pen below the waistline, the right corner touching the waistline. Sidle up until the left corner touches the waistline, then pull down and make this nice elliptical exit. Go back to the original position here and draw the horizontal just under the waistline. Don't run it through the waistline. Don't put it on top of the waistline. F is somewhat similar. In rapid handwriting, we'll keep the F and P simpler and have just a simple base here to P, not pulling it way down, not curving it, and the F may end in just this incomplete way. But it's much easier when you're writing rapidly. Now, the crossbar on the F starts with the corner of the pen's nib touching the stem, you see, under the waistline. Then you pull it over the width of N and then come up off the paper. This makes F the width of N. All letters are the width of N except L, I, and R, which are narrower, and M, W, and X, which are wider. So there are 20 letters in the Italic alphabet that are the same width. And N, or O, of course, gives you your measures, your scale. There is an alternate T, you'll notice, given in the exercise. And you touch the stem just underneath the waistline with the right corner of the nib and then pull it over. Now, either of these T's is acceptable. However, don't make the mistake of going up too far with that hairline and then producing a little counter in there. We don't want that white paper in there. The T is beginning to look like a figure 4, and we don't want the figure 4 mixed in with this. The figure 4 is a very important figure. I think one of the most beautiful of all the figures, and let's not confuse those two. Let's take probe. By the way, don't fasten the paper down to the desk. Make your left-hander in its keep, and the left hand should hold the paper and move it around. You write on the same place on the writing desk all the time. It's a big writing desk, but that's to hold the paper. But when it comes to the writing is done in the same place, and wherever you are on the paper, you'll move the paper around so that you can write in the same place. Watch the paper. You're designing paper. Paper is most of the letter. And your written page will be a continuum. Not letters plop down into empty space at all, but letters that are part of the total space.